Okay. So yeah, we covered sort of the some of the shocks that you had.
Sure.
Um, Now looking back on it, so you've been an entrepreneur for a number of years now. What are some of the lessons you learned
Sure.
coming from the corporate world, coming from academia, and then becoming an entrepreneur?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that when you're an entrepreneur, especially versus industry, you're making a lot of less money than, and at least initially, than you would ever make in industry. Doesn't mean the long term you're going to make a lot more money, but in the short term, you're making a lot less money. For example, I do SBIRs, and you have to write a grant. You're not paid to write the grant. You're paid when you receive the grant, and then you apply for a phase two. You may SBIR. You have to wait months between grant applications, and you may not receive it. So one of the most important things that I realized is you got to cut costs. You know,
Hmm.
in your life, you have to learn how to live cheaply. It
Hmm.
means a lot of things. It means deciding where you're going to live, and considering the cost of where you want to live.
Hmm.
At one point, I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, a very expensive college town, where I went to graduate school. Apartments, single bed apartments could cost $2,000 a month, and is this affordable? And one of the decisions I made is to move back to Iowa, where I own a house, and where I can significantly reduce costs. And so costs, and especially what type of office space you want. You don't
Hmm.
need, if you're a lawyer and you're trying to bring in business, that's one thing. But if you're just working as an engineer, you don't need uber expensive office space. You may, for some companies you work with, you may need to have industrial office space just to do basic interactions, but limit the money you spend on office space, limit the money you spend on employees, limit the money you spend as a person individually because you don't have a regular office space. And working as an entrepreneur, at least initially, is not you're not like your corporate friends who are, you know, making over $100,000 and can live wherever they want. You're taking a sacrifice to do this, and you have to accept that. So that's a lesson that took me a while to learn. Does that make sense?
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, it's easier to burn money than you think.
It's a lot easier to burn money than you think.
Okay.
It really is, and you should be very cognizant of that.
Okay. And I think with that, there's also a lesson that it might be a greater sacrifice than people think it's going to be in terms of
Abs-
lifestyle, position of where they're at,
Absolutely,
everything like that. I
absolutely.
think that's not seen. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are okay, or maybe even some are pretty good at doing the budget. You know what I mean? Like, of like, okay, how much capital my business is going to require? How much
Yeah.
is it going to do that? I think they're not so good at seeing what I call cost of living issues.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, does that make sense? I mean, if you are an entrepreneur and you're trying to start up in Silicon Valley, that is one of the most expensive places
Places, a
in the
lot of
planet.
California. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
to do that. Or, if you're in downtown Manhattan, um, maybe not as much startup hotbed, but there's a lot of entrepreneurial activity there, but
Sure.
very expensive.
Yeah,
Just general stuff, food, transport, things like that. I'm sure it's
absolutely.
very, very costly. And I think a lot of people don't factor that into their business model, their business plan. They might be able to calculate, well, okay, when's my break even or how much capital I'm going to need,
Sure.
but they're
But
not looking at that on the personal side of things. So I think that's a
exactly. And
great
you,
point.
you need to look at it on the personal side. So that
When did that, sorry, just when did
sure.
this the dawning, like you say, it took you a while to learn it. I
It
think I
took
heard
me
you
a
say.
while. It took
About
me
how long did kind of that sink in, if you don't mind
I
me
mean, I
asking?
would say midway through, I received the first, SBIR award, phase one, and I did it for about a year, and then it started sinking in.
So was it like you were about a year or two into doing your thing
A
when?
year or two in, and you're looking at your finances, saying, I still have to write a phase two grant. I still have to, and there's a period between, hearing back, and
Right.
I may not get it. I didn't. I'm trying again. And so if you really have to watch your finances, you have to have a plan, and you don't necessarily need to be in New York. You don't need, that's another thing I learned. You do not, need to be in New York. You do not need to be in Silicon Valley to do this. And you don't need to be in Ann Arbor to do this or Detroit. You,
Especially with the digital world we have now.
especially where you can work from anywhere. And this is maybe a specific issue to SBIRs, is that you should really think carefully about what state you choose to live in. Do you have a support network in that state of friends, family, etc.? Um, and a lot of states will actually incentivize startups to come into their state.
Hmm.
And they'll do that through a lot of different programs, through SBIR programs. And states like California, who have more startups than they know what to do with, they're not going to be all that generous. A state like Iowa or Kentucky, they could be a lot more generous just to try to bring in technology companies.
Hmm.
And you need to consider that. If you have a significant other, you need to talk to them about that.
Yep.
And that's something I wish if I had done it over again, I would have really investigated this, really thought through this. Your goal is to make the company work. Your goal is not to live as a hipster in some city, right?
Okay. And you probably thought you had to be in Ann Arbor or somewhere like it to really make this work.
Yeah,
It
and you
sounds
don't.
like since then you've found that
You
that's not necessarily the
no,
case.
and in fact, sometimes quite the opposite. You need to be able to have some people around you that with technical understanding that you can hire. You don't if you, Another thing is, you should be the lead technical person on your team. You should have the expertise. If you're heavily reliant on another individual for a lot of the technical expertise, you got to really think why you're even in the startup business in the first place, from the tech side.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And why is the reliance on someone else bad? It's not their baby and they could just walk out the door or what?
exactly. It's not their baby, and they can walk out the door. They could gouge you with prices.
Hold you hostage, basically.
They can hold you hostage, and especially in a startup, you don't. I mean, that's another lesson. You don't want to be in a position where you're held hostage with the technology, and that
Interesting.
and that, that's and that's does happen, you know, and you need to be very careful of that. You need to plan for it.
Yeah.
Um,
And if the primary founder doesn't have that there needs to be some questions asked about that too.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
like why is that the case? You
Why
know what
is
I mean?
that the case?
Why if they're not the primary person who understands this technology,
Why
you
are
know,
they the ones starting the
why are they
business?
doing it? Yeah, why
Yeah,
are they doing it? That would be yeah, that's definitely something they should.
they sh
There needs to be a hard question asked. That hard question has to be asked and answered.
absolutely and
Yeah,
answered,
yeah.
and maybe
Unless that person is an equal co. I mean, there's some circumstances around it,
sure.
but like yeah, if it's you have a primary founder and then you have someone way down the pike in terms of no or little ownership, but that person's the most critical to the company. Why is that?
Why is that?
Yeah,
That
why is
that
that?
type of company is not going to last. That type of company, that type of situation is going to fall apart
Correct. I would
one
agree.
way or the other.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. That's a very unstable
Yeah, terribly
situation.
unstable.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and that type of thing happens a lot. It happens more than you think, and that's one of the reasons a lot of these companies do fail is that there's an imbalance in who has the technical skills versus who has the ownership. And companies will die because of that. So that's when you're trying to figure out the direction to go through, you need to be very aware of that. So.
Interesting.
So what you need as an entrepreneur, in terms of employees is just qualified engineers. They can be engineers straight out of school, really.
Mhm.
You shouldn't be relying on trying to find the expertise for your company elsewhere.
Interesting. Now, what are some other lessons learned that you've got for our audience?
Um, Another one,
Hopefully less painful, but
yeah,
sometimes the best lessons, I guess, are painful, but
yeah.
the
This one's
best in
this
quotation
one's a
mark.
little less, somewhat less painful. That starting a business is kind of a lonely experience.
Mhm. And what do you mean by that?
Well, when I worked in industry, when I was in academia, you had a social network. Sometimes you didn't like the people that you're around, but nonetheless, you liked a few of them. You had a social network, especially in academia. You walk into your lab, and you immediately had a friend to go to a bar to hang out with, or if you wanted to take a walk, to go for a walk with and chat. You can find those people. They're easy to find. There's student groups you could join. In industry, you had an office mate, you had parties and what have you. You could skip out work and go watch a movie, which, when you're alone as an entrepreneur, you're alone. You don't have that built-in social network, and you don't have someone to go talk with and chat with, saying, "Oh, I'm struggling with this problem. I'm frustrated." And so you need a social outlet.
And one point, if I may add on that,
Sure.
that I think some people may not be aware of, Jimmy,
Mhm.
is that um, it's very difficult as an entrepreneur to relate to most employees.
It is
And
absolutely.
so that's why I think like an average employee, you might as well be speaking Mandarin Chinese to someone who doesn't know any Chinese. It is completely alien to the problems experienced by the entrepreneur are completely alien to the vast majority of employees.
They
And
are,
I think
yeah.
that that's something people don't realize. So yeah, that can, because you can't even share your problems. It's totally
You know,
foreign to them.
yeah,
It does kind of create a sense of loneliness, like you
yeah,
read
it,
about.
it, it really does. You can talk about how do I, you know, create this project from scratch? How do I meet payroll? How do how are you working with this employee that's problematic?
Totally alien to almost everybody
That's
except other entrepreneurs.
exactly. It that no one except another entrepreneur is going to really understand that why this is even an issue.
Yeah, why it's even a problem.
Yep. So one of the things
Much,
that
much less even what to do about it.
what to do about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly. A, they're not even going to really understand the problem as a problem,
Yeah.
and B, they will have virtually no input or
Mhm.
or capacity to comment on
Yeah.
what do you do about it?
Yeah.
How do you approach it? Maybe how do you solve it? So
Exactly. And so, you know, you need to find a support network somehow, that so you're not going to be isolated. Maybe it's other entrepreneurs. Maybe you make friends with other entrepreneurs, such as, both of us. Maybe you um, join organizations in your community. Maybe you make sure to choose a community where you have a built-in friend network and contact network. That's one of the reasons I like living in Iowa, exactly where I grew up. I live in the same house I've been living in since 1985, right? Uh, I've known some of my neighbors for decades.
mhm.
I've known people in Cedar Falls, Iowa for literally for decades, for 40 years,
uh,
and so it's important to have a social network, whether it's church, whether it's a club that you're doing. Maybe you're in Colorado and it's a rock climbing club, right?
right.
You know, um, it's important to find that social network because it can be a lonely, isolating experience.
Mm.
And so that's one of the things that, I mean, it's also a shock to me, when you're in academia, when you're in industry, there's a built-in social network. But when you're an entrepreneur, you're alone.
Yeah, the
And
complete absence of the
yeah,
network was a shock to you.
the complete absence of any type of network was a shock to me. Absolutely.
Interesting. And that's kind of that you say that it was a shock. I mean, our society, in some respects, lionizes entrepreneurs.
They
That
Yeah.
is the pinnacle of professional and work achievement. And one would think, given the, I would say propaganda machine, but given the marketing machine for the mythical, the heroic entrepreneur,
Right.
climbing the mountain, um, that how lonely it is, how few people really do it. And
Sure.
some people could say maybe there's some truth to it that after climbing the mountain, the entrepreneur stands alone and is alone on the climb, and
Yeah.
that there may be some truth to the image. But it's
Sure.
kind of funny for how lionized entrepreneurs are. It can be a lonely journey, and even if you succeed well, it can be lonely at the top. So
Yeah, it really can be.
and I think a lot of people don't understand that or don't know that. I have found also that other people are not. I don't know if you ran into this, Jimmy, but a lot of people aren't necessarily encouraging of one
Oh,
becoming an
no, not
entrepreneur.
at all.
So not
No.
only is there not much of a support system, there is a lot of undermining, either direct or conscious or
Absolutely.
indirect,
Indirect.
even by well-meaning friends and family.
Yeah.
There's not the decision to even go entrepreneurial is not really supported by many folks. Now, we can have a whole show on that,
But
by
yeah,
you know, of
I've
how friends and family might deliberately or indirectly undermine you or project their own thing, or why aren't you have a quote stable paycheck, all that.
yeah,
That's a whole
you're
subject,
not
but
playing the societal
you're
game.
not really going with that. And some of that maybe could be driven by people being a bit jealous of you, actually,
Sure.
that you actually are doing that and they wish they could. I think that certainly is not uniformly. I think that is at work in some of them. But yeah, in addition to it's lonely, and then there's not a lot of people that are going to be, I mean, a lot of people say, well, geez, you should just quit that foolishness and get a job.
Exactly. That's exactly what they say.
Yeah, that's exactly almost verbatim what they say.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just that sounds really hard. Run, go get a
Why don't
job.
you just get a
Chop, chop.
40-hour job, on vacation?
Yeah, yeah,
Why aren't you like me? The
yeah,
person
yeah,
with the nicest vacation wins. That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
life's
That's
about, right?
yeah, that's what it's about. So,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people underestimate how much that is, and some of the loneliness with it. Because yeah, if you one thing we didn't say is if you go to the people with these problems, go to employees, people who are non-entrepreneurial with
Mhm.
these problems, that may be their initial reaction. Wow, that sounds like that sucks. You should just get a job and quit.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, and some folks saying that actually wouldn't be being mean or cruel. They believe
They
that's
don't
the
get it.
solution.
Yeah.
They don't understand why you're subjecting yourself to
Yep.
that. Why would you ever even try to solve a problem around that?
Yeah.
And you should just, well, just chuck that and go get a job and be happy.
Right.
It's
So that is another, lesson learned, and you have to find a social network, whatever it is. Luckily, being an entrepreneur gives you more flexibility to find that social network.
that is an upside. You
That is,
can, yeah,
yeah,
if you're conscious and intentional about locating
yeah,
a support network for yourself or social niche or niches
yeah,
for yourself, that is available to you. You do have more flexibility to do that. That's absolutely true.
yeah.
So, other lessons from your
Uh,
non-traditional journey to entrepreneurship.
I think those are the big ones
Okay.
that I can come up with right now. So
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, we can always do an addendum
uh,
onto this if necessary. But no, I think that's been very helpful for
yeah,
to hear from a lot of our listeners. I think that would be a lot of lessons learned. And I think one, at least from me hearing your story, the biggest takeaway I have is that there is a lot of different ways to become an entrepreneur. There's a lot of different pathways
no,
you can have to
absolutely,
that.
sure,
Like I said, it can come from corporate world to entrepreneurship, academia, entrepreneurship, or both.
absolutely, yep,
In your case, both, a quite an extended stint in both, and that's where you end up.
sure.
And so it's possible, even if your prior career or educational trajectory has had nothing to do with being a business owner or entrepreneurship, you can come to it. It is possible.
One more thing I would add is, I'm a middle-aged guy.
Hmm.
There was some surprise, me being an entrepreneur in my 40s.
Yeah, true.
People would be like, you don't fit the mold. People would literally tell me that. And they're like, most of the people who take this challenge, they're in their 20s or 30s. They're not in their 40s.
And that's interesting to say that, Jimmy, because there actually is, and I don't have the research handy, but that is it's a common but factually wrong misperception.
I can believe it's actually wrong.
No, well, no. So the highest, well, just take a guess. What is the age bracket where a founder has the highest likelihood of success, and by far, by a considerable margin?
Probably the 40s.
45 to 55. In
Exactly.
fact, the single biggest determiner
Yeah.
of success with a new business is the age of the founder, and overwhelmingly 45 to 55 has the highest success rate, far higher than the 20s. What
Yeah,
has
I
happened in
believe
our
it. Yeah, I
society
believe it.
is you have the wonder kids in tech.
Yeah.
You have Zuckerberg's,
But
maybe
they're the minority.
what the trouble is statistically in the data that there is a aura of success, like there's such a big cultural phenomena that we've taken this collection of 5 to 10 people and
Yeah.
said that that's the norm. And it's absolutely, the data just doesn't
Show that. Yeah.
born this out. There's another YouTube, I think it's called CoffeeZilla, where he got into a lot of the really great data on this. And he just said, that this is the image that people have. Like he did a great segment of comparing the image from surveys that people have, which is what you experience, to what the actual data is. In fact, he said the biggest thing is look at the biggest predictor of success of all the variables that have been crunched is the age of the founder. And that is bigger than anything, and it's the highest by far, almost 2 or 3 times. We're not talking like 50% more. It's like 2 or 3 times higher than the 20. Yeah, so the data doesn't really bear that out.
Well,
I don't have it at my fingertips, but I know for a fact that that's so. Yeah, but unfortunately, you're getting it from the perception, not the reality. And yeah, you're too old. Why are you doing this? You're has been, and they're just not aware of that. And it's from that image of a few very, very, like count them on both hands. Young tech superstars that went massive.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about being a middle-aged guy is you're not naive anymore, right?
Yeah, and well, and then deeper into some of these studies, there's a lot of reasons for the success. One is just business experience, and that is a value. You can evaluate risk better. Often there's just deeper knowledge of the industry or the tech that they're doing. There's a deeper understanding of what customers are looking for. So there's a lot of stuff that plays into that when they peeled back the onion and they looked at some of the deeper reasons for the success of that group. So.
But it's something to be aware of because I've received those comments.
Oh yeah, yes, I think that's a valid point.
And I was a little confused, but it's happened more than once.
Yeah, so. And I think also, like I said, there's this profile that people have. It's typically male, younger guy who does the tech superstar, and I think all people, everybody, old, whatever, women, whoever, whatever your background is, should not be intimidated with that. By the way, the age of the founder held true for women as well. Success. So it's across the board on that. So
women, I mean, can be, fantastic engineering founders of companies.
Yeah, and like I said, we've taken about 10 young dudes.
Yeah.
And we've said they had this spectacular success. We said that's the profile of an entrepreneur, and that's just wrong.
Yeah, interesting.
It's factually just absolutely wrong in terms of doing that. And what's funny is some venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, even though they know that data, still believe in that myth, even though the overwhelming amount of data to the contrary, they're still bought into it. Because of that. It's got a powerful hold in that. And that, you're going to encounter that if you do it later in life for sure. So cheers. All right, Jimmy. Well, an interesting show again today. And thank you for joining us. And well, everyone, thank you for listening. And do appreciate, feel free to leave us some comments, send us some emails. Hopefully no hate mail. So talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.